Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Lettermen Live show presented by Wendy's. You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them all the way up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker, try the spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you, they'll light you up. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's. All right, Andy. It's Iowa week. It's the first Big Ten home game of the season. Buckeyes are wearing gray. Seems like a big one, no?
Yeah, I mean, I think we got in that sense being in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center the last couple of days. They're taking this one pretty seriously, and I think they should be. Iowa isn't ranked, but it certainly feels like one of those Big Ten teams that should be ranked. Of course, they had that loss to Iowa State that kind of sticks out, and that's why they're not in the AP poll rankings right now, but they're receiving votes, and for good reason. I think this rushing offense is really intriguing and potentially concerning for Ohio State, considering the defensive struggles struggles relatively the last couple of weeks. So I'm really intrigued to see what happens at the line of scrimmage. Can Iowa win that battle a little bit? Or is it just going to be continued, overall domination by the Ohio State defense?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest matchups of this game. We'll get into matchups and everything else as we roll along here on Lettermen Live presented by Wendy's. But I'm intrigued likewise on the other side of the ball. Can the Ohio State offense establish the run against this Iowa front? It's one of the best fronts in the country. Just an all-around nasty unit. And Ohio State's going to have to be its toughest and its most physical. You talk about like games that you are decided in from January to August. This is one of them because, the things you did in the offseason to get bigger, faster, stronger, tougher, more physical, they're going to show up or they're I guess they'll show up either way. The work or lack thereof that you did will become apparent in a game like this. We talk about just a few of them a year. Iowa, if they're on the schedule. Penn State, they're on the schedule every year. Michigan, obviously, they're on the schedule every year. So this is one of those ones that you circle like, okay, who's tougher? Who's going to punch each other in the mouth? And Ohio State thinks that it has a really good run game this year. Well, you don't know that you have a good run game until you face this Iowa unit. So I'm really excited, on the other side of the ball to see that as we start to dive into things here.
Yeah, I mean, schedule-wise, you're almost thinking like it is a tough spot to face Iowa. Not only do you have to play Oregon the following week, which we've all circled on the calendar as the most important regular season game outside of the Michigan game, but also Iowa's coming off a bye. Like they had a week of rest, so they're going to give you their best shot in all three phases of the game. And yeah, you mentioned that run defense. I mean, they're second in the Big Ten. You're the top of the country, second only behind Ohio State in the Big Ten, right? With 62 yards per game given up on the ground. So they're for real up front. And they're such a veteran team overall, but especially on defense. That's just the way this program is built. They're not bringing in all these 4- and 5-star guys. They're one of those programs across the country that really prides itself on development and continuity. I mean, Kirk Ferentz has been there forever. Phil Parker has been there forever. And when you have that continuity, you have guys that buy in and they get older with the program and they get better and better and better. I mean, Jay Higgins at linebacker is probably a really good example of that phenomenon, right? I think he had 171 tackles last year. He's been awesome again this year. Their linebackers in general are great. So this defense is built on that mold of just older guys that know where to go and they know how to make plays.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to Tom Kakert over there at Hawkeye Report this week and talking to him just about the matchup and things. And I said, I really love this Iowa secondary. And he made the comment. He's like, well, you haven't dug into Iowa yet, have you? I was like, oh, I'm getting there very early stages. He's like, well, you're not going to love them when you see what they've put on film so far. They've struggled a little bit. It's one of the biggest things that I think, and I maybe that's where we dive into actual matchups here. Like this Iowa secondary has struggled, Andy. They gave up big passing plays to Troy. They gave up big passing plays to put Iowa State in a position to win that game with a 54-yard game-winning field goal. A unit that should be good. The corners are veteran. They're good. They've taken their lumps early, though. Xavier Wampa, former Ohio State target, 5-star safety, stayed home in the state of Iowa, should be really good this year. And has just struggled a little bit, if we're being honest. So I'm very intrigued how Ohio State chooses to kick this game off in attack. Do you go right at Iowa and prove that you're the dominant force here with your run game? or do you go where you know that they're maybe a little vulnerable? I'm just very intrigued to see what Chip Kelly does to start this game out. Does he go through the air or does he establish the ground game?
Yeah, one of the reasons why they lost that Cyhawk game, right, is a 75-yard touchdown pass they gave up at the end there. And, they also gave up a 30-yard pass in that game in the final minute to set up a game-winning field goal for the Cyclones. And then you go to the final playing Troy, and they get beat deep for 2 long touchdown passes. So actually, Iowa is last in the Big Ten with 3 plays of 60 or more pass yards given up. I think that's just a surprising stat. You never really think they're going to be last in any defensive stat category. So their secondary, as you mentioned, has not been as good as in years past and as good as last year. I do think it's interesting. They've already benched one starter in TJ Hall at the cornerback position. They went to Deshaun Lee. That was one move that Phil Parker made. So they're not playing around there. I do think that Jamari Harris is one of the better corners in the Big Ten right now. So they do have that going for them. But I think one defensive back that I kind of have circled is Sebastian Castro, one of their safeties. They play him a lot in the slot. He's kind of like their nickel safety. So I think for Emeka Egbuka, you have to watch Lettermen Row's Friday video, but I have a big prediction for Emeka Egbuka, what he could do in the slot for Ohio State this week. And I think he could be pretty productive because Sebastian Castro there in the slot has been targeted more than any defensive back for Iowa this year, and he's given up 15 catches. So I think there's some wiggle room for this passing offense, Spencer. I don't even know if they need to be as dominant as everyone's expecting them to try to be on the ground.
Yeah, you wonder if they start off the game with some of the quick action that we've seen at the beginning of games. The Akron game where Jeremiah Smith should have housed that screen. The Western Michigan game where Emeka Egbuka, or was that the Marshall game where Emeka Egbuka sprinted out on one of the first plays of the game? One of those 2 blowouts.
Marshall,
yeah, they've all kind of run together now that we're in conference play. I know it's only been one conference game, but I feel like we're kind of pretty deep into it since that first one was a road game and the non-con's just completely out of the way. But the bottom line, as our buddy Tim Mayo likes to say, is, I just wonder if Ohio State will attack the quick game to start, get Iowa running horizontally. Iowa, as good as they are defensively, they don't play a ton of depth because it's very sound, it's very smart football. You get off the field quickly because you're Iowa, and you hold teams to nothing. If you get this team running sideline to sideline, I think then you can go vertical, or you can have Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson kind of punch you in the mouth. And so I wonder if Ohio State, like I said, whether it be, through the air or on the ground, if they start out going a little horizontal, seeing if they can stretch this defense and then hit them vertically afterward. You can even hit things vertically in the run game. That just happens up the middle, whereas in the pass game, it's very on the outside. You know what I'm saying? All of that's to say, I just am very intrigued with Chip Kelly here against Phil Parker for the first time.
Yeah, and he said you can't out-scheme him, right? But I do think there's a bit of a chess match there because with time of possession, you don't want to go pass-oriented too much because if you go 3 and out or you have a string of incompletions, you're not chewing a lot of clock, whereas Iowa wants to control the clock. They want to have that ground game going, and their best shot, honestly, is to force a couple turnovers and control the clock to limit the number of Ohio State offensive possessions. So I do think you need to have a lot of balance offensively just so you can thwart that clock controlling offense of Iowa and, make sure they're not limiting your number of plays. I think Marshall, right, did a really good job, surprisingly, of milking that clock. And all of a sudden, what Ohio State had 6 plays in the first quarter against Marshall.
Yeah.
So again, that's team's best chance against Ohio State is to control the clock and make sure Ohio State has limited number of plays, limited number of possessions. And that is the one danger of going with the pass offense that's more, pass dominant, because if you have a couple of incompletions, you have a 3 and out, you're putting yourself at that risk of getting the other team the opportunity to milk the clock.
Yeah, we got a good point here. Everyone is saying that Iowa's good defensively, but I'm trying to see who they played with that type of offense that the Bucks have. Well, here's the thing. Nobody in college football has the offense that the Ohio State has. The 2 running backs, it's a 2-headed monster. Jeremiah Smith might be the best receiver in college football. And if he's not, Emeka Egbuka also has an argument for that title. Chris, I appreciate the question in a way. I mean, we'll talk about it as a question. And I understand the point with Minnesota and Troy and Iowa State, but Iowa State does have some weapons. Abu Sama is a really good running back, one of the better running backs in the Big 12 this year. You go to the receivers that Iowa State has, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll, are really good players. And I'm not comparing them at all to what Ohio State has, but this is an Iowa team that did shut down for the most part that Iowa State attack. And so obviously it's not apples to apples, but there is a little bit of something we can take from what they did against Iowa State and limiting how the clones were able to attack them. And Attack of the Clones. I'm a Star Wars guy. I'm sorry. And we can kind of take that and see how they might try to slow down what Ohio State's going to do.
Yeah, and you can also flip that question around, right? Like, yes, the Ohio State offensive line has looked much better this year so far, but who have they gone up against? Yeah, you can say the Michigan State defensive line was significantly more stiff competition than whatever they faced in the first 3 games, but still, like, it's been nothing compared to the Iowa defensive front. And so how do we know what this offensive line for Ohio State will do? We all think that it can be good, but that's why this is such a test before you go to Oregon. What are they going to look like on the ground? And a lot of that's dependent on what this offensive line is going to look like. And, talking to the players, earlier this week, Seth McLaughlin pointed out this Iowa defensive line plays a lot of 2-gap. They depend on those linebackers to make the stops. I'm just wondering if this interior of the offensive line is going to hold up. Donovan Jackson, you have a lot of confidence in. What's it going to be like at right guard with Tager Shabola and Austin Saravelt? What's that rotation going to look like? Are they going to be able to be as good as they have been recently in that rotation to pave the lane for some of these runs in between, the tackles and have some success on the ground there in that department?
Well, one of the things that I think is interesting when you look at it that way, and what Seth said is obviously correct. He's very smart when it comes to football, but Ohio State has been really good this year at getting to the second level and blocking linebackers. Iowa relies on its linebackers to make plays. And the more this week goes on, you dive into this matchup, everybody wants to talk about, make Will Howard make these mistakes, make Ohio State earn it. They're not going to be able to run very much on this Iowa defense. I'm starting to wonder if we might see Ohio State be able to run the ball pretty effectively because, this Ohio State offensive line is extremely athletic. And if you can get to the second level on this Iowa team and block up the second level, I have a lot of confidence in Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins and their ability to hit home runs if you get them, 4 or 5 yards then before they get contact. And so that's just a thought that I have. And I wonder if Ohio State exploits that system that Iowa runs where they rely on those linebackers because of how athletic this offensive line is for Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, right? It's certainly possible, but Iowa relies on those guys for a reason. They're just really darn good.
They are good.
Jay Higgins or Nick Jackson, like they're both 100 tackle plus magnet type linebackers. And I think they're hard to shed. Like they're hard to really get a hold of. And connecting on those second level blocks was an issue for Ohio State last year. It's a different line this year, but even in the first game, it wasn't perfect. And since then, it's been significantly better. Yeah, they just have to be at their A game to pull that off. I don't know. That's why this is such a test.
That's why it's a chess match. Yeah. Because it's who we all think is one of the best offensive minds in the game against pound for pound, probably the best defensive coordinator the last 20 years because he does so much with little talent. They're very talented, obviously, but he does so much with these 2- and 3-star guys that Iowa recruits that, you've got to consider him among the 4 or 5 best defensive coordinators in the country. So in any given year, he kind of makes, chicken salad every single year. So it's so fun, man. I'm so excited to see these two go at it. And maybe I'm even more excited to see what happens when they come out of the locker room after halftime because they're both going to have these adjustments where they think, oh, we really got Phil Parker here. And Phil Parker's going to say, oh, I think I got Chip Kelly here. It's going to be a blast. And then let's get into keys to the game, Andy. We've kind of touched on them a little bit. Obviously, we think Ohio State needs to establish the run. I wrote 3 keys to the game for LettermenRow.com on Thursday. Go get that coverage at LettermenRow.com. What do you got? What's your big key to the game? Maybe something that you're thinking. Maybe what's on your mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to mention Caleb Johnson, the running back from Iowa, because he's near the top of the country in rushing yards right now. I believe he's second behind Ashton Genty from Boise State, who could very well be a Heisman Trophy finalist. So Caleb Johnson's been awesome. And I think everyone at Ohio State knows that. He's an Ohio guy. He had a couple comments this week about, wanting to beat Ohio State. That's all in good jest. Like I think that's just something you would say as a guy who's making his name right now at Iowa. But look, the bottom line is they need to find ways to limit him from having 10, 15-yard runs. They need to bring him down within 4 or 5 yards to give this defense a chance on third down. If you give Iowa opportunities to have third and short, you're making life a lot easier for Cade McNamara, who I think that's also a storyline that's kind of underrated this week. Like Cade McNamara playing Ohio State again. We can talk about that later maybe. But
oh, yeah.
Yeah, so like I think overall you want to make life hard for Cade McNamara. You want to have him in third and long. Make him make those throws that he's struggled at times throughout his career to actually make. Put him in those situations. But if Caleb Johnson has a lot of success on early downs, running the football, like, we've seen at times the last couple of weeks for the opposition, then things get interesting.
Yeah, if you make Cade McNamara try to beat you, I like Ohio State's chances. They didn't really do that in 2021 in the Michigan game. Hassan Haskins had 5 touchdowns. And when Michigan did choose to throw the ball, Cade McNamara was picked off right near the goal line by Ohio State. If somebody in the comments tells me who picked that pass off, I know who picked the pass off, but I'm just kind of testing Ohio State fans here. I know you know, Andy. I'm just testing Ohio State fans here. Don't look it up, please. We'll just go on the honor system, but go ahead and tell me who picked that pass off. There we go. Ed Rogers, Bryson Shaw picked off Cade McNamara in the 2021 edition of the game. Just trying to make this a more interactive show every week, Andy. For the viewers at home, I'm gonna go. One of my keys to the game is play clean special teams. Iowa's got something up their sleeve all the time, man. They tried a fake punt in the last matchup of these two teams. They had a fake specialist play in the 2017 beatdown up in Iowa City. Like, they've always got something. And so you've always got to be ready for that. Kirk Ferentz, for as conservative as he is at all times, he's always got something, a little trick up that sleeve of his. So I just wonder if they've got something there. Ohio State hasn't been great on special teams this year. Michigan State was a pretty clean game, though. So I think that you've got to play really clean football in that phase of the game, or, you're going to give Iowa an extra possession. Iowa's going to steal one from you. Iowa's going to fake something on you and make you pay. I think it's too critical for this team to play well at home, and that includes special teams.
Yeah, I agree with that. And special teams had a bounce back week at Michigan State. I think that Jaden Fielding really stepped up. I mean, he did his job, which is the expectation, but I think it's worth noting that he had 7 kickoffs, 7 touchbacks. That's the way he'd want it to be. Still, he drilled the ball. Like, I think one of them was 81 yards on a kickoff that he had. Also made a field goal on that opening possession. So good to see him bounce back if you're Ohio State. And otherwise, really clean game for special teams after a bit of a messy game against Marshall, which I think brought up some bad memories for people over the last couple of years and what's happened on special teams.
Yeah, so we're going to do a little bit of a draft here. You got a second one? You got another key to the game? Or are we just, stop the run, play good special teams? Sounds like a real Iowa game we've got going on here.
Yeah, I mean, if you do that, you're probably in pretty good shape, right? I think this is the game to pull out some quarterback run. Like, a lot of people were talking about it up to Michigan State game. I see it more of this week to equalize the numbers. I think if you're trying to take out those linebackers, well, hey, another way is to give yourself basically another blocker. And with Will Howard running the football, you have that. They always talk about equating numbers in the run game. This is a great way to do that, to neutralize those linebackers a little bit. I think we see a little bit more of Will Howard running the football. This is a great time to do it. I guess it's barring – he said he's got his wind knocked out of him against Michigan State. If there's anything more to that, maybe they don't do that. But if he's fine, like we think he is, then, yeah, I would expect them to run with Will Howard a little bit more. Put some more of that on tape, too, for Oregon to have to handle the following week. That feels like something that could definitely happen this week against Iowa.
Yeah, I think you're right there because, Iowa's going to sell out to stop. Well, they're not going to sell out to stop the run, but they're going to make sure that they do a good job of stopping the run. And so if you put something in the run game that they haven't seen yet, I think that gives you an advantage even against this really, really good, well-coached defense. So, if you can bring out a little bit of that Will Howard run, if you can sprinkle in just a touch of pulling the ball instead of giving it every time, or, a couple things off of that Jeremiah Smith reverse that involves Will Howard that they ran last week, I'm with you there. I think the Will Howard run against Michigan State for the touchdown was actually were they reading the nose tackle there? I think they were. They let him come into the backfield. that was nifty, if you will, because usually when you think read option, you think like, we're going to read this defensive end, we're going to read this outside linebacker. He's being a little too aggressive, so we're going to read him. No, they just read the interior defensive lineman, let these offensive linemen get to the second level, and poof, Will Howard celebrating 6 in the end zone. So I really liked that, and I would like to see more of that moving forward from this offense, especially like you said, you're going on the road to Eugene next week. You've got to be – that's a pull out everything you've got game. And so I think, you can start to sprinkle some of that in against Iowa.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the time. We always talk about that right before the Michigan game, right? They put things on tape just so Michigan has to take that into account, makes their job harder. It's the same thing with any of these matchup games. Like, this is an opportunity to put some things on tape that Oregon's going to have to worry about and spend time doing, preparation for. And maybe you don't go to that in the Oregon game, but it's all about the chess match, right? Playing the mind games to make things harder for your opponent. So I think it's possible. I would, but I don't get paid money to call plays or coordinate offenses. So
how do you think you would do if you did?
I'd probably be somewhere in like the Sun Belt and probably fighting for my job.
Oh man, I was gonna name Sun Belt schools, but I don't want to dunk on anybody. We never know who's watching this thing or where we'll be in our futures.
Yeah.
Play caller Andy Backstrom. That's what we're gonna start calling him. He's the offensive coordinator here. I guess I'm just playing defense.
Quality control.
Me? Quality control. Can I do special teams? I'll ask Rob Keys and Gunnar Daniel over there on the special team staff if I can just do some special team stuff. All right, I'll go one more key to win. I think Ryan Day's got to stay aggressive. I know Iowa wants you drag you into the mud. You think like 4th and 1 at the 49-yard line. You can pin him deep, but he's been aggressive this year, and it has gotten him some really good results. This team is good on 4th down. They're good on 3rd and 4th down. There's no reason to let the opponent dictate what you're doing on 3rd and 4th down. If you know that you've got something, and I thought this was interesting this week, is Chip Kelly said if you've got a play that you're confident in on 4th down, then you can call it for a 4th down, but you're not just going to call a 4th down because you're in the field position to go for it on 4th down. You have to have a play call for that. Well, they seem to have a lot of them because they're executing at a really high level there on those money downs. I'm thinking that Ryan Day needs to stay aggressive, and that doesn't mean play recklessly against this Iowa team because they will make you pay if you make critical errors. But, the aggression has been a breath of fresh air for a lot of people already this year, and I think that should continue. It shouldn't be, opponent dictated. And I hope to see it against Oregon and at Penn State and against Michigan this year. And, when they get to the college football playoff against an Alabama or a Tennessee, like I want to see that aggression. And I don't think that the opponent should dictate those terms.
So I personally love when coaches go for it on 4th down, and the stats are interesting so far. Ohio State's gone for it on 4th down 8 times. That's tied for the most such attempts of any Big Ten team this season. It's 47th nationally in that same department. So, again, that's 2 times per game so far. They've only played 4 games. But you look at last year, it was 1.38 times per game they went for it on 4th down. And the year before that, it was 1.31 times per game in 2022. So, again, and that's with C.J. Stroud at quarterback, who you really have confidence in to convert those situations. So, again, an uptick of aggressiveness so far. The one thing I will say to push back on that, and we've talked about this so far this week, and Ryan Day said it on his radio show today, you're dealing with a situation of a game that's a lot on the field position side of things. Like, it's a field position battle. And yes, as you said, like, you're risking giving up some of that field position. Do you do that in a game like this? Again, I'm with you. Be aggressive. Lay it all out there. I love when coaches do that. I mean, I don't know if I'm quite at the Dan Campbell level for the Detroit Lions, but I'm probably somewhere in between. But I do think we might see less of that this week just because there is this mindset of like, you don't want to give Iowa any free yards. And by going for it, you're putting your defense in a tougher situation than it otherwise would be with a special teams play or punt that drills them inside the 10, inside the 5. So I don't know if we're going to see it as much this week, but I'm with you overall. I think the aggressiveness has been good so far.
So just to get this straight, you think that it should be a little opponent adjusted
Yes.
on aggression?
I do. Yeah, I do.
You don't want the full Lane Kiffin experience where they're just going for it on 4th down just to say they did it in the press conference after the game?
I mean, look, I don't want that. And I also think Ryan Day doesn't want that because yesterday he was asked about it, and he was like, we do it based on how to win the game. Like if we think it's the right opportunity, we're going to do it, but if they don't, they're not going to do it. Like it's not trying to prove a point. And I think that's something that's interesting about this season. Like it felt like at times last year and even the year before, they were running the ball in third and fourth and short situations kind of just to prove a point. Like, hey guys, we're tough. Like, get it? Like, we're tough. And sometimes it felt like that maybe wasn't the right decision for the game, but like they were still doing it anyway to prove a point. It feels like this year so far, the decision making in game has been more of this is the right decision for this point of the game, and it makes the most sense rather than we just need to do this because we need to do this. And
it almost last year, I don't mean to cut you off, I'm sorry. It almost felt disingenuous at times last year. Like they were just like, yeah, like you said, like we're going to prove that we're tough and we're going to do it by gaining a yard on 3rd and 1 from the 40-yard line. It's like, well, there was a pass play that you could have called there that was wide open. Whereas like it doesn't really matter the situation right now. Like if they've got to play for it, they're going to run it. And like 4th and 5, did they need to throw an out route to Emeka Egbuka that could have went for a touchdown? Absolutely not. They could have just gained 5 yards. But they took the ball down the field. Why? Because they were confident in that play call, and they knew that they could make the play. The quarterback sneaks with Will Howard. I think the calculus has changed a lot there in the aggression on 4th and short because you've got a 6'5", 250-pound man playing quarterback who is a veteran, who's smart with the football in those situations, knows how to tuck it and get that yard. I'm a Steelers fan. I watched Ben Roethlisberger at 260 pounds one year get every single 4th down on a man. You watch the Eagles pretty frequently, although you're oddly a Cardinals fan. You know what the 4th down and short can do. Like you said, I guess I'm just repeating your point, but like everything seems to like have a purpose this year, whereas last year it felt like you said, they were just doing it in order to say that they were tough. And I know that's not exactly why, but there was a layer of that I think was there. And I think they've peeled back that layer this year and just allowed themselves to be aggressive for the sake of winning the game and not just being aggressive for the sake of saying they're aggressive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, look, there was something about that Notre Dame game. Yes, they win, and they win on the play with Chip Trayanum bursting into the end zone or just barely getting in really against 10 defenders, actually. And that was the whole mantra, and I think that was fine, and that was cool, and I get why that happened and why that was done. But at the end of the day, like, it always goes back to, like, if you really need to say it a lot, are you actually doing it? Like, and sometimes when you don't say it and you're just doing it, it's more powerful. I think that's kind of where they're at right now with the toughness side of things, where they're at right now with the run-pass balance, with the effectiveness on the ground. They're just kind of doing things, and it's pretty effective so far, and they don't need to talk about it. And I think that's a better spot to be in.
He's not saying it.
Yeah.
Ryan Day has said this year they want to be the hardest working team in America. Well, I think you're going to be pretty tough if you become the hardest working team in America. And there's no metrics that tell you they're the hardest working team. They just wanted to show up on Saturdays. So, last year we walked into this press conferences, Ryan Day's talking about toughness. He wants us to be the toughest team. He wants us to be the most physical and violent team. No, this year it's just like, we want to be the hardest working team. And if we're the hardest working team, we know we have the talent to beat you. And I think that is like, it might not sound that different, but that is so different. It really is. Like the tenor of everything is just so different. Like, hey, we didn't work hard enough, so we got to work harder. We're going into a tougher stretch here. We got to work harder. It's not, hey, we have to be tougher because we're going to play Iowa. It's, hey, we got to work harder. Like, that is a different connotation, and it sends a different message, and it sets a different tone compared to last year. And I personally, I love it. I've been such a fan of the messaging this year compared to the last couple of years with the staff and with this team.
Yeah, I think it's a difference. I think that's a big part of him stepping away from the play calling, having a better idea of what he wants to say to the team, a better idea of how he wants to manage a game, how he wants to manage the staff. I think that all factors in. But yeah, this has been a good discussion. I've enjoyed this one. Should we shift back more towards the game? We can also do, like, now we're 4 games in. Where do you feel like this team is at after one Big Ten game? Like, there's different directions we can go here. Where do you want to choose?
Well, before we get to anything, Andy, I got to tell you, man, I got hungry the other day, and I hopped in the car because I try to eat lunch at home, but I hopped in the car and I went down and had the Wendy's nugs covered in sauce. You've had them dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Ed Rogers, you had them? Sage, Ohio, he's back in the comments. Love Sage, Ohio. Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love, and they turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker like Andy Backstrom, you can try the spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some napkins. Yes, you're going to need some napkins. And and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's, a participating U.S. Wendy's. Yeah, I mean, you're almost piloting this thing at this point, Andy. 4 games in. I love this. 4 games in. How are we feeling? 4 games in. Let's go. Let's do this simple stuff, but it'll become discussion. We'll go 4 games in, pass offense, run offense, pass defense, run defense. We'll just kind of, go through all 4 of those aspects. And then maybe we'll talk a little special teams before we get to the slate at the end of this program. So let's start with run offense. I mean, it's been good. It's been good, but it's opponent adjusted. How good has it been? I really don't know. It's not a cop-out answer. Like, I truly don't know. And I think that's what makes this Iowa game, as we make this a little game-centric as we do this discussion. That's what's so exciting about this game is, like, even against some conference opponents, you don't feel like you're going to learn a lot. Like Michigan State last week, how would they handle the road was something we would learn. But other than that, like, I didn't go into that game thinking like, oh, we're going to learn a lot about this team other than like it's championship medal. Not today, Saturday when they play this game, not today. I'm going to learn a lot about where this run game is, because if you can run the ball in Iowa, you can run the ball on anybody.
Well, I think you're feeling really good about Carlos Lachlan and that hire right now. I think the way he's managed the carries so far has been exactly what you would want. And look, TreVeyon Henderson has only taken 31 carries, and I think that's great because, look, he's averaging 8.9 yards per carry. He's got 4 touchdowns, 276 yards. He's still on track. If they play multiple playoff games like everyone expects, he'll go over 1,000 yards. That's what you would want. You want him to be healthy. He's had trouble with injuries at times. You want him at his best towards the end of the season. Quinshon Judkins has only had 47 carries, which still is most on the team, but compared to what he had the first couple of years at Ole Miss, it's a lot less than he's been usually taking at this point in the season. Yeah. So they're both averaging more than 8 yards per carry. And by the way, James Peoples, who's really important right now, is getting some really good run late in games. He has 32 carries on the season, actually one more than TreVeyon Henderson. So he's right along the way too, not as efficient, but again, working with different offensive linemen. Of course, that factors in. But I think you really have to like what Carlos Lachlan has done so far with these running backs. I know he was confident about the rotation coming in. He's dealt with crowded backfields before, but it's not the easiest thing to manage that. And I think so far, the fact that it hasn't been this huge talking point of like, oh, why isn't TreVeyon in? Why isn't Quinshon in? Like, that's been a good thing. That means he's doing a really good job so far.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just looked it up just while you were talking there. Quinshon Judkins, 274 carries as a true freshman, 271 carries as a sophomore. This year, 47 carries through 4 games. You know what the pace is for that? He's on pace for 12 games, and he played in 13 games in each of these. So I guess it's not apples to apples, but he's on pace for 141 carries. He would have to get at least twice as many carries in every single game and then some to match his total from last year. You talk about a guy who didn't look bad as he was getting all these carries late in the season last year. Didn't look like he was like completely gassed. And he's also more fresh this year. And he's really good at this. It's been so fun to watch Carlos Lachlan manage this rotation. It's not something that you really notice in game because you just say, oh, TreVeyon's out there. Oh, Quinshon's out there. And I think that's the biggest compliment that we can pay right now to Carlos Lachlan is it never feels in a game like, oh, why is TreVeyon out there? Why can't Quinshon be in there right now? Why is Quinshon in there right now instead of TreVeyon? He's gotten a lot more playing time. Like, the way that this has been managed has been a masterclass in running back, load management, if you will. And I cannot speak highly enough of what they're doing right now with these backs. I would give this, I guess if we're going to grade this through 4 games, I'd give it just a massive A+. But of course, the Iowa caveat, as it's become known nationwide now, we just don't know how good they actually are because they haven't played Iowa.
Yeah. So where are we moving to next?
Passing offense.
Yeah. Again, like Will Howard, same caveat, right? Like every week is a referendum on Will Howard. I think that is that's just Howard is living right now. It's a good life because he's the Ohio State starting quarterback and things are going well right now. But that's the test he's got to pass every single week. He has passed it every single week so far. I think every challenge that has been presented his way, he has responded to, including last week. He throws the interception, just a bad decision, a bad throw. He bounces back. He gets hit, knocked out of the game. He bounces back. That drive he had to start the second half, more than 7 minutes of game time. He has 2 fourth-down conversions. One is just handing the ball off to Quinshon Judkins, but the other one's a 4th and 5. As you mentioned, throw to Emeka Egbuka. I think Will Howard has done everything that you would have asked him to be. I think he's more accurate than maybe expected on those intermediate throws. He hasn't had to do a lot downfield, only 8 attempts at 20 or more air yards, but he's completed 4 of them. So I think he has been even better than advertised. I think that's what we expected with the better weapons around him. But again, as I said, this is a new test, new week, new test. That's going to be every single week.
Yeah, and then you talk about a real test. Going to Oregon next week. Yeah. Just another test. Like they're just going to continue to come because then you've got the off week after Oregon, but then you have a really good defense in Nebraska. Hey, like you said, another referendum on Will Howard. He is under like maybe the biggest microscope I think I've seen as the Ohio State quarterback. It's also good for him though. I think that it has been nice to not be the guy after the guy. Like he didn't have to immediately follow CJ Stroud, which is such a leg up for him that he probably doesn't even realize he has. It's like last year, every single time something went wrong in the passing, it was like, oh, CJ could have done that.
Yeah.
Instead, it's like, which like, again, like that is not a knock on Kyle McCord. There's part of me that feels bad that he had to follow CJ. Like anybody who had to follow CJ was just going to be scrutinized because they weren't CJ Stroud, especially when CJ was doing what he was doing in the NFL last year. So for Will to now be the guy after the guy where it's like, oh man, I don't know if Kyle McCord could make that throw. It's kind of nice instead of saying, well, CJ would have done that. CJ would have completed that. That would have been a completion under CJ. So I will say, while he is under the microscope at all times, it is kind of nice for him that instead of comparing him to CJ Stroud, we're comparing him to Kyle McCord, which I think is a leg up. But then he's also throwing to just ridiculous receivers. I'm not there yet, but like if you told me at the end of the year that this was the best receiving core that Ohio State's had, I don't know how far off you'd be.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough because,
2021 was nuts.
Yeah, when you have Garrett Wilson and you have Chris Olave and you have Jackson Smith and Jigba, I mean, that is hard to beat. And then, by the way, when Marvin Harrison Jr. needs to step in and when Emeka Egbuka needs to step in, yeah, they're still really darn good too. I think that one's tough to beat, but this is good too. And I think Jeremiah Smith we've talked about it now for multiple weeks. He is wide receiver 1. And again, Emeka Egbuka is wide receiver 1B. Like it doesn't really matter. They're both really good. I still think Emeka Egbuka can be a first-round pick. I think he's been really great the last few weeks, especially. And he can do just about everything you would need as well. But I think it's nice that they can still put him in the slot and kind of expose some of those matchups because if you can get your guy who can line up anywhere, but you put him in the slot based off matchups to win in those spots, like I think they will this week against Sebastian Castro, that's a good thing. That's a good position to be in. They don't need to play him out wide if they don't want to. Carnell Tate sneakily has been pretty good. I think a few drops here and there that he'll clean up as the year goes on, as his career goes on. But those top 3, just as good as anyone in the country. And number 4 certainly has his case among all wide receivers, not just freshman wide receivers.
And then I know that this isn't part of the passing offense, but the blocking from these receivers and the blocking from the skill position in general, before we move on to defense, like that's the engine that makes this offense go. A lot of these bigger plays are not happening, whether it be in the run game or in the screen game, if they're not willing blockers. And it's maybe the most impressive thing of the entire Ryan Day era that they're getting 5-star receivers. That 5-star receivers traditionally are divas, and they're getting 5-star receivers who are blocking their absolute tails off and doing the dirty work of things that, quite frankly, like you're not sure if they're going to do when they get recruited. And then they just come in and do it. Like Jeremiah Smith is not just I think he's a good blocking receiver. Emeka Egbuka is incredible at blocking. No wonder he was mad that his NCAA strength rating was too low. Like he's proving it time and time again that it was too low. So I just that aspect of this is again maybe one of the most impressive things of the Ryan Day era.
Yeah, and Brian Hartline deserves a lot of credit for that as well. I think we haven't talked a lot about Brian Hartline this year because he's got the co-tag for offensive coordinator. He is still as a receivers coach. Chip Kelly's obviously the one calling plays, but Brian Hartline, continued credit that he needs to get for obviously recruiting these guys, first of all, which he does get, but then also developing, like you're talking about, the run blocking skill for these guys on the perimeter. I think that part of the discussion of his I think maybe the evaluation part gets heightened a lot when people talk about Brian Hartline. The development of these guys when they get here maybe doesn't get talked about because a lot of these guys don't have to block in high school. They're not asked to do it as much, maybe. It's not like a ticket to playing time. They're already playing, or they're playing in 7-7. They're not doing that, obviously, there. So he deserves some credit for that, I think.
All right, let's go defense. Let's talk defense. We'll talk defense for like 10 minutes, and then we'll get into the slate. I know Sage, Ohio is champing at the bit to hear what we have to say about the slate around the country like we did last week. It's a lot of fun. The last 10 minutes, we get to have a little bit of fun. Let's talk defense. Run defense. Do we just not know? They've been really, really good against the run. The last 2 weeks have been interesting without Tyleik Williams, but in an ideal world, you have Tyleik Williams in the biggest games. You're going to have him this week. Knock on wood, you'll have him against Oregon. Knock on wood, you'll have him the rest of the way, right? Like injuries can always happen, but you think that hopefully he's already got that little injury bug out of the way now. They've been good. We just haven't seen him against a Heisman Trophy candidate like Caleb Johnson. And then you're going to go on a run here where you're going to see Caleb Johnson. Is it Jordan? What's the Oregon's running back's name? It's slipping my mind. He's a good player. I'm sorry. I cover Ohio State. There's Jordan a lot. Yeah, Jordan James. I knew it. I just didn't want to say it and be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, they also have Noah Whittington as well. So
yeah. And then you're going to see a really good stable backs from Nebraska. You're going to see Nick Singleton and Katron Allen at Penn State. Like, you're going to see some really, really good running backs the next 8-9 weeks of this season. But that Caleb Johnson might be the best of all of them. And so we're going to learn so much about this run defense moving forward this week.
Yeah, I think it was a bit alarming, to be honest, that the defensive tackle position was definitely uncovered a little bit without having your starting 3-tech there with Tyleik Williams. Yeah. His importance was just really highlighted the last couple of weeks. And, I think it's worth noting how much work he's put in to be able to play the amount of snaps that he plays for this Ohio State defense. I think that was a revelation last year because it was a problem for him at the beginning of his career, endurance and being able to stay on the field. Last year, he proved he could do it. So far this year, when he's been on the field, he's been really great. But it's such a nuanced conversation, right? Like, it's not that Tywone Malone or Hero Kanu or any of those guys can't be on the field. It's just that their impact in 10 to 15 snaps is probably what you need for the standard of the defense they want to play. But in 25, 30 or, whatever you're dealing with in more of a starter level role, I think it's just that difference, that gap between where Tyleik's at right now in his career and what those guys are at right now in their career. It was a little bit noticeable. And I think playing up there in the front, you don't want it to be that noticeable. And again, maybe those guys will get there even as the season goes on or next year. But right now, I think Tyleik is just that much ahead. And so it's good to get him back for this week against Iowa. But otherwise, I think in run defense, you're expecting more from the linebackers. I think there's been some really good moments from Cody Simon, from Sonny Styles, from Arvell Reese, of course. But I think especially with Sonny Styles, we would like to see him take that next step. Jim Knowles is confident that he can take that next step. I think he will. I think it's just that process is accelerated, right? Like, it's got to happen quicker than later. And that also factors in to run defense as you're getting to these better, bigger teams that are going to also connect on those second level blocks that we talk about with Ohio State. And the linebackers are going to be even more important there.
I'm interested, Andy, because I had a little bit of a revelation today in my own head. I'm sure people have talked about this before. Don't give me credit. I'm really not that smart. The best run defense oftentimes for Ohio State is their offense, because there's nothing that makes a run first team more angry than being in a deficit early. Yeah. And the prime example is the 2021 Michigan State game. That Michigan State team had Jaden Reed and Keon Coleman. I think Keon Coleman was on that roster. They were really, really freaking good at running the ball. And the passing game was kind of just an additive there. And when Ohio State jumped up on them 14-0, the run game was completely taken out of the game. Kenneth Walker lost his Heisman Trophy on that Saturday in the Horseshoe. I know that it's such a smaller example, but last week Ohio State got up 10-0, and the duo of K'Ron Lynch-Adams and
Nate Carter.
And Nate Carter, very good running back duo, right? Could not do anything on the ground because then you had to play from behind. And I'm not comparing those two to Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker is still fantastic with the Seahawks. One of the things that I think Ohio State can do that other teams don't necessarily have the luxury of doing is they can jump on you early and make you have to play from behind. Like the teams that I think of, like Michigan is not good at playing from behind. They can't throw the forward pass. Iowa has a quarterback who is limited. I don't think he's bad, but I think he's limited. If you make them play from behind, you automatically have a better run defense because teams can't run the ball as much. And so this run defense can be better and can be an elite unit because of the offense. And I know we don't think of it in those terms a lot, but it's just something that's on my mind right now because I think this Ohio State offense can score early on this Iowa team and take Caleb Johnson not out of the game, but almost neutralize him and not let him have so many carries because Iowa's going to have to try to move the ball quicker earlier in the game. All that's to say, this is still a great litmus test for this Ohio State run defense.
Yeah, and we look at the pass D as well. Like I think it's been, again, really good so far. Everything's been overall really good for the Ohio State defense. Like again, they've given up 27 total points through 4 games. You can't really argue with the bottom line there. I get and I see and I hear everything about there's concerns with the run D, like we just talked about, concerns with some of the pass defense. I heard a lot about this week with how much they played off at times against Michigan State. And Jim Knowles was asked about it. He said, they probably do need to press in some of those situations, man coverage at times. And I do think that, especially with someone like David Singleton, like that is his strength. Yeah. He is a press man, corner who gets physical, who wins, on those releases against receivers. He holds his own. They had him up, I think, back not 10 yards, but like 6-7 yards at times, which I think that just is not going to work for him very well. I think he was exploited a little bit against Michigan State. So I don't think Davidson has had maybe his best start. But again, a lot of that's just because last week he's been targeted 15 times, given up 9 catches, 46, 1 touchdown. But look, this team has given up 2 passing touchdowns all year. I think Jordan Hancock's been really good recently. I think Denzel Burke has held his own as well. I don't know if it's been as much of like a eye-popping, this is BIA yet. I think that's also because they haven't played the opponents. Like it's with Caleb Downs, right? Sometimes you just don't notice these guys because they're taking away shots that teams could normally take, and they're not taking those shots because they're not there. That's kind of what's happening right now with the Ohio State secondary. Maybe more the first 3 weeks than last week, but just because they don't have interceptions or maybe their reception percentage allowed isn't as low as you would want it to be doesn't mean they haven't been good.
Andy, I'm thinking back to a couple weeks ago. It was actually when we were talking to Denzel Burke when he's like, I'm not going to talk about the ejection, so don't ask me about the ejection. And then everyone asked him about the ejection. Mm-hmm. He said something that had me thinking quite a bit. He hated the beginning of this season, the schedule. Do you think that this secondary, especially knowing these quarterbacks that they face, the whole defense hasn't really seen much? Like the secondary was just asleep at the wheel for 2 games, and then Marshall woke them up, and then after they got woken up, they completely shut Marshall down. And then Michigan State, then you finally have to play football, and you need woken up again. And once you kind of neutralize everything in Michigan State, they were locked down again. Do you think that maybe we just are – and then they've got Iowa this week who throws to the tight ends. So, do you think this is just a matter of the secondary doesn't see anybody that's, quite frankly, if we're being honest with ourselves, that's any good? and then all of a sudden, like once they do see somebody that's good, they can just flip the switch. It felt like they flipped the switch all of a sudden against Michigan State. If they need to, I feel like they can against these Iowa receivers, because I don't think Ohio State's going to respect the Iowa receivers, and then they'll know what they're up against when they go to Oregon. So I'm just curious, like this pass defense, maybe it's just a matter of like they just didn't feel like they needed to do anything in the secondary.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would say that, but like,
I don't think anybody's going to say it, but I think we can talk about it.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a bad point at all. I mean, look at those guys; they thrive off competition. It's the iron sharpens iron. They're going up against Jeremiah Smith and
exactly
and Emeka Egbuka and Will Howard and Devin Brown and and Julian Sand, and go down the line, right? But yeah, I think that's not a crazy thing to say at all. I think they're guys that thrive off of competition, and maybe when you don't have maybe as close competition as you're facing in practice, maybe that factors in. But again, like they want to be on their P's and Q's, and I think for the most part they have been.
Yeah.
And all these games are super important. Like Denzel Burke wants to be a first round pick. Eventually, Davidson Minosa wants to be a first round pick. Jordan Hancock, all these guys want to be in those early rounds and in first round if they can be. So yeah, it's possible. I do kind of agree with you though that like once it comes to be time, like at Oregon, that's probably where like we notice things more, because I said earlier, like if a shot is not there because these defensive backs take it away, they're not going to be thrown at. So maybe, they have more receptions given up in proportion to the targets than they would have had normally, compared to the higher level of competition they faced last year. But I don't know if you should sound the alarm yet, because overall, like I think the defensive backs have still been pretty solid.
Man, next week's going to be so fun. Trayshawn Holden, Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart.
Yeah. No, it's great.
Oh, man. Now we got to watch him play the Iowa receivers. Man.
Hey, you're sleeping on Jacob Gill, man. 13 catches, 145. Reese Vanderzee.
You just named the fifth receiver on Oregon's roster. Like that would be fifth right now for Oregon. He's the leading receiver for Iowa, non-tight end receiver. Yeah. All right, Andy, this note card is full. Okay. Sage Ohio's asking for picks. We got to give him some picks. I mean, like, you know what? If nothing else on this Thursday night program, we give the people what they want. We give them advertisements for chicken nuggets and picks about games that we really don't know anything about. What could be better than that? All right.
Let her roll.
Let's go. I'm going to start off with your alma mater, Boston College, going to Virginia, who just got a huge win over Coastal Carolina, then took the week off to celebrate. Now they get the Wahoos get to host Boston College. Who you got?
Yeah, I was actually there the last time, or 2 times ago. They were in Charlottesville in 2017. I think they're going to win this game. They have Tommy Castellanos back. I'm going BC.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go BC as well. Our friends down on the plains at Auburn. My best friends right now, there's some Auburn fans on the On3 board who are not happy with me. And you know what? It's all in good fun, except they got kind of mean. Auburn at Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia, and it's not even close. Auburn and Hugh Freeze have put themselves in a really bad spot.
Yeah.
Enough said.
They're terrible. SMU at Louisville.
SMU come off that win against FSU. I don't know. I think I'm going SMU with this one. Although I don't hate the Tyler Shuck offense with Louisville, but I don't know. Upset.
Okay. Did you see the Tyler Shuck throw last week?
Yeah, it was crazy. It was incredible.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, Tyler Shuck. I was not familiar with your game.
Well, you'd have to watch them at 3 schools to know it. So
yeah, that's true. All right, Mizzou at Texas A&M, the only ranked versus ranked matchup this week. I don't know why is Texas A&M ranked. I don't know, but they're ranked, so you got to talk about this game, I guess.
I'm taking Mizzou off the bye. Yeah,
I actually just completely dismissed Texas A&M, and then I'm going to take Texas A&M because I think Mizzou is fraudulent, but I think both these teams are. So
okay.
Right. But I'll take the home team. Michigan State at Oregon on Friday night.
Yeah, Oregon. I think Oregon's really finding its groove, which I mean, I'm just going to say it's a good thing for Ohio State fans. Like, you want to see a competitive game. You want to see Oregon at its best. You want to see Ohio State challenge. Obviously, you want to see Ohio State win. But I think early in the season it was like, is this going to even be a top 10 matchup? Because it felt like Oregon was on the verge of dropping a game. I think they'll be fine on Friday night against the Spartans.
All right, Ole Miss just lost to Kentucky, which was significant to some. We're not going to name who, but it was significant to some. Andy got to watch that firsthand. Who the game was significant for. Ole Miss at South Carolina. Now they got to go listen to Sandstorm for 3 hours. Who you got?
Yeah, Ole Miss. I think they'll bounce back. I mean, I think they'll still be a team that's in the CFP field, or at least in the conversation. And yeah, I don't think they're going to take their second loss yet. I think they'll have 2 losses, and this is not one of them.
I think it's going to be close. I think they're going to pull out a win, but I'm not confident in that. That looked dicey last week. That did not look like something that is just going to go away.
Yeah, and South Carolina went over Kentucky looking better and better as
exactly
that goes on.
All right, the Andy Backstrom matchup of the week. This is going to be reserved every week for 2 teams that a lot of people would be like, really? And Andy's like, oh, yeah, let's watch. Rutgers at Nebraska.
Oh, yeah, I do like that one.
There we go.
You know what? I'm going Rutgers.
Wow.
You know, I think the way Nebraska started against Purdue had me a little bit surprised. Yeah, I thought they were going to coast in that game. They win 28-10, but it was closer than you think going into the fourth quarter. I like what Rutgers is doing right now. They know their identity. Ethan Kellick-Manis looks better than he did at Minnesota. Maybe that's a Minnesota problem, to be honest. And I think Rutgers continues undefeated.
I actually agree with you. I'm going to go Rutgers as well. The Nebraska special teams, dicey last week. And Greg knows what he's doing on special teams. So I'm going to go with Rutgers. We've got 5 more. I've got 5 more for you because this is such a fun slate. Everybody talks about these weeks where there's so many ranked unranked matchups. No, these are the fun weeks. This is when the chaos happens. We got West Virginia heading to Stillwater to take on the Pokes. This is going to be a fun game because I think the loser of this game's fan base is going to be very, very irritated with the way that they've started the season. Who you got?
Yeah, Oklahoma State. Yeah.
Alan Bowman, believer?
I just don't think they're going to drop their third game. I just don't see that happening. But, you know, where you fall on it? You buying in? You buying stock? WVU?
I mean, I don't think Garrett Green's like the worst quarterback. But I don't think they're as good as they were last year. They had a lot of luck last year. I think Oklahoma State will win. I'm not a believer in Oklahoma State, but
I'm not either. I have Kansas State
at home.
But
yeah, they're at home, so it's like all right, Clemson at Florida State.
Yeah, Clemson. I mean, Brockland, man, it's a tough position to be in. Yeah, Clemson, and it's not close. And I actually think that people need to start talking about Clemson more because Kate Klubnik, as much criticism he's gotten the last couple of years, he looks pretty good right now.
Yep.
He looks pretty good.
Yeah, it's almost like that Garrett Riley offense is finally taking hold.
Yeah, Max Duggan's back there.
Yeah, well, the ghost of Max Duggan.
Yeah.
Isn't it hilarious? Just a little side note real quick. Isn't it hilarious that Jim Harbaugh got hired by Michigan or by the Chargers and immediately cut the guy who beat him in the college football playoff as like the third string quarterback?
Is he practice squad? Is he there? Is he still like?
I don't know, but I just saw Max Duggan cut like the day after Harbaugh got hired, and I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he didn't cut J.K. Dobbins and Joe Bosa either.
Free agent, yeah. Wow.
All right, USC at Minnesota.
Yeah, USC. I think, look, Miller Moss is about 300 yards passing per game. I think it's safe. I think it's safe to say he's pretty good. Yeah, like I don't think you need to worry anymore about the quarterback position for USC going forward. Minnesota had some fight in them in Ann Arbor last week. I think they'll put up a little bit some resistance, similar to what Wisconsin did, but I don't think USC will get down quite like they did in Madison. So going USC.
Yeah, Minnesota got hosed last week. I'm not saying they would have scored, but they definitely should have had the ball.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Big Ten literally changed the rule afterwards.
Yeah. Miami at Cal. I'm going to say it. I don't care. Coke versus woke. When I saw that on Twitter, I thought I was going to lose my mind laughing so hard.
Miami. Yeah. And I don't think it'll be close.
Oh, I think it's going to be close. This Cal defense kind of frisky. And you get a turnover-prone quarterback like Cam Ward.
Okay. turnover prone, but extremely fun quarterback. Can't wait.
Oh, he's so fun. He's awesome.
Yeah.
He's the perfect ACC leading quarterback because is he good? We really don't know, but he is a ton of fun.
Well, Kyle McCord is kind of in that category a little bit. Not that he runs a ton, but 14 touchdowns, 5 picks.
A little turnover prone. That's what you need in the ACC. A little turnover prone.
He's just a gunslinger at this point, which is cool to see because he was not that at Ohio State.
Off the field, post-retirement issues aside, Kyle has a little bit of Brett Favre in him. Like the way that he just kind of flings it.
Important qualifier there. Yes. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Just the way he flings it, and it just comes off his hand really smoothly. So
yeah.
I love that. I think it's fun.
I think Favre was, a little bit better off platform, like out of structure. Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Until he had to throw across his body in the playoffs. And then the headliner, everybody's waiting for our pick. Michigan in the purple rain, going to Washington at night. Sailgating. Actually, it's not really at night. It's 4:30 local, but the sailgating is going to be alive and well. Husky Stadium's going to be rocking. Ohio State goes out there next year, and I'm so freaking excited for that game. It's going to be awesome when Ohio State goes there. It's probably going to be awesome when Michigan's there. Rematch of the national championship game. Michigan is actually a 3.5 or 2.5 point dog on the road as the number 10 team in the country against an unranked opponent. Who you got?
Yeah, I'm going Michigan. I know you might have a different opinion on this, but look, they're going to win ugly games. They're going to be up. They're going to let the lead slip. They're still going to win. I think this is still a good team, not a great team. I think they know their identity. I don't think Alex Orji needs to do a ton. I think he needs to do a little bit more every week. We saw a little bit more against Minnesota. I think we should see a little bit more against Washington. Yeah, I think they win.
If Jack Tuttle plays, I'm intrigued because then all of a sudden you're putting a quarterback in who a lot of people did think was the best passer in that quarterback room. So, maybe they'll go 2 quarterback again, but with Jack Tuttle instead of Davis Warren. I do think Michigan wins this game, but I think it's going to be really, really close. Like this, I think it's going to be like 23-20, something in that realm, of that ilk, 20-17, 20-16, even if you will. I like Michigan, but very, very, very close. Speaking of close or close, we're going to close this thing out. Andy Backstrom on the other side of that screen. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. We're just having fun. We talk 50 minutes of good, hard football, and then we get to a lot of fun in the last 10 minutes. I hope everybody enjoys this thing. This is my favorite part of the week, Thursday nights with Andy live, Lettermen Live, presented by Wendy's. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Like the video below. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then get your tail over to LettermenRow.com. Come hang out on the Lettermen Lounge message board. Get all of this Ohio State football coverage that we provide here on the YouTube channel, just in written format, and then you can talk about it in the Lettermen Lounge message board. Come to LettermenRow.com. We'll see you guys over there, and we'll see you Saturday in the Horseshoe for Ohio State and Iowa at 3:30.